Hello everybody. Since I'm not in class today, I'd like you to watch this 1.4 video lesson and complete the notes as I go through them. You're welcome to pause and rewind the video at any time if you need more time to write things down. Once you're finished, please show the sub that you've completed the notes and they'll check your name off the list, and then you can work on the check your understanding practice problems. Here we go, lesson 1.4, rewrite formulas and equations. In this lesson, we're really just going to look at kind of a continuation of 1.3. The definition of a formula is simply an equation that relates two or more quantities. Over on the right, you see a variety of formulas that I hope look familiar to you. I'm not going to ask that you memorize them, but we will work with several of them pretty often, so hopefully they'll just kind of be something that you remember. When asked to rewrite a formula, we're going to follow kind of the same process that we did in 1.3 with working backwards using PEMDAS. We have a couple of examples down below where we take one of the given formulas and then just isolate one particular variable. Here's our first example. Use the circumference formula and solve for r. We just want to isolate one of the variables in that equation. I'm going to start simply by writing the formula out. Circumference equals 2 times pi times r. If we're trying to isolate the r variable, notice the 2 and the pi are both being multiplied to r. The opposite then of multiply would be to simply divide. If we would divide 2 and pi at one time on the left, we can do the same thing, on the right, we can do the same thing on the left. The 2's cancel and the pi's cancel. We get r by itself on one side, capital C for circumference divided by the product of 2 pi underneath it, and just isolating one of the variables. Question 2, we kind of have an extension. It says use the perimeter formula this time and solve for W. Then find the width of a rectangle with a length of 12 and a perimeter of 41. So we have two parts, okay? I'm not quite sure why this 2 is right here, so we're just going to scribble that out. I don't know why that's even there, you guys. Sorry. All right, the first thing we're going to do is use the perimeter formula to solve for W. Perimeter, by definition, is 2 times the width, or 2 times the length, plus 2 times the width. That's the distance all the way around a rectangle. If we're trying to get W by itself, we want to isolate just that part of the entire formula. If we're using PEMDAS backwards, we want to get rid of anything that's being added or subtracted to that variable. 2L and 2W are adding to each other. The first thing I'm going to do then is move that 2L over by subtracting. Order of operations, we have to subtract in particular order. We'll do top minus bottom on this one. Capital P minus 2L. On the right, the 2L's cancel, and we have 2 times the width. Now that 2 is being multiplied to the W, I'm simply going to divide. And I have to divide the entire left-hand side by that 2. I'm going to cancel out the 2 on the right. Notice W is all that's left over on that right-hand side. Therefore, W is going to equal P minus 2L, all divided by 2. Be careful not to cancel the 2's out here. The top part is one big subtraction problem, and you have to do that before you divide by 2. The second part of the problem now, it says find the width of the rectangle if the length is 12 and the perimeter is 41. So we're trying to find W. We know perimeter is 41, and we know length is 12. So I just plugged in capital P and lowercase l. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can simplify to determine the width. Once you think you have an answer, press play and we'll see if we get a match. Let's see how you did. 41 minus 2 times 12, well 2 times 12 is 24. 41 minus 24 would be 17. And 17 divided by 2 would be 8.5 meters. That's the width of that rectangle. Taking a look at rewriting any kind of equation, solve 9x minus 4y equals 7 for y. We've done this before. There's nothing tricky here. It's almost like putting it in slope-intercept form. If you're trying to isolate the y variable, again, we need to get rid of anything that's being added or subtracted to it first using PEMDAS backwards. Be careful with that idea though. Notice it's 9x minus 4y, but the 9x is actually positive. There isn't anything in front of it that would make it a negative 9. Therefore, to move it over, we have to subtract that 9x. And that leaves us with negative 4y left over. The subtraction problem now becomes a negative coefficient. And then on the right, just remember to subtract in order, 7 minus 9x. Last but not least, to get y by itself, we can simply divide both sides by negative 4. This is very similar in process to what we did on that last problem up above. The 7 minus 9x needs to be one big group so that we remember to complete that before we divide by negative 4. Now over on the right, I'm going to have you change the directions. Please cross off the problem that's there, and it says solve for y when x equals 8. So this is a continuation. Whoops, sorry about that. Didn't mean to make that go all crazy. This is just now going to be a continuation of that first problem. It says solve for y when x equals 8. So if we plug in 8 for x, like so, and divide by 4. Again, pause the video and see if you can simplify. Then press play when you're done. Hopefully you got y equals negative 65 fourths or negative 16.25. On the back, we're going to cross off the equation that has c and d in it and just move to the equation over on the right. This one has your variable in the denominator. So this is going to require something that we haven't done quite yet as a method for solving. Again, thinking about PEMDAS backwards, we're asked to solve for y. Getting rid of anything that's being added or subtracted, I'm going to move the 2 divided by x over by subtracting it. When we do that, we get 3 over y equals 5 minus 2 over x. I want to make that right-hand side one big term instead of a subtraction of 2 smaller terms. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to put 5 over 1 and get a common denominator. Now a common denominator of 1 and x would just be x. That means I'm going to multiply the top and bottom on that 5 value to get that common denominator. This makes 3 over y equal to 5x over x minus 2 over x. And now we can combine the numerator into one fraction, 5x minus 2 all over x. You might be asking yourself, why would we even do that? Well, here's what we need to do. In order to solve for y, we need to get it out of the denominator. So what I'm going to do is put parentheses around that 5x minus 2 and cross multiply. I'm going to take y times that parenthesis, but notice I'm not going to distribute y in. And then I'm going to take 3 times the other denominator. And here's what we can do from here. To get y by itself, if it's being multiplied by that parenthesis, we're just going to divide out the entire parenthesis at once. Watch this. If I just write 5x minus 2 underneath and do the same thing on the other side, that allows us to cross off the entire parenthesis on the left. And we get a pretty cumbersome looking equation on the right-hand side. Y equals, on the top we have just 3x, and on the bottom we have 5x minus 2. Because of that parenthesis, we can't cross the x's off. So that would be our final answer. And now let's solve for y when x equals negative 3. If we plug in negative 3 both on top and in the denominator, we would get 3 times negative 3 in the numerator, which is negative 9. Over 5 times negative 3 is negative 15, minus 2 would be negative 17. The only thing we can do to simplify this fraction is to remember that 2 negatives in a fraction cancel out to make a positive. Therefore, when x equals negative 3, y is 9/17. And now for a little bit of application. It says find the base of a triangle that has an area of 120 inches squared and a height of 15 inches. On the front, we have the formula for area of a triangle. I'm going to start with that. Area of a triangle is 1/2 times the product of the base and the height. We're trying to solve for the base, and we know 2 other pieces of information. Let's plug those in. Area is 120 inches squared. I'm going to plug that in on the left. 1/2 times b times h, which is 15, on the right. We're trying to figure out what b equals. Well, if we think about the associative property for multiplication from lesson 1.1, you can multiply in any order. And what that means for us is we can take 1/2 times 15 and get 7.5 times b. To get b by itself, we'll simply divide. So on your calculator, please type in 120 divided by 7.5. And you should get b equals 16. Now we have to think about our label. Remember, we're talking about labeling answers. Get into the habit of that. Base and height are both one-dimensional measures. Area is two-dimensional, and that's why the label for area was inches squared. So the base and the height are both labeled in plain inches. And that's your final answer. Let's try another one. A new streaming service charges $15 to rent a premium new release movie and $7 to rent an older movie. Write an equation that represents the store's monthly revenue. So we have new movies and we have old movies. We need 2 variables. I'm going to say let x equal the number of new movies rented, and we'll let y equal the number of old movies rented. We're looking to solve for revenue, so we need to have another variable. Let's make revenue capital R, and that'll be revenue equals. The revenue is found by taking the money from the new videos plus the money from the old videos. R equals our total revenue. For each new movie rented, we charge $15. That means 15 times X would give us how much money we earn for selling X number of new movies. Plus $7 to rent an older movie, so $7 would be times Y, the number of old movies that we sell. And there's your formula. The second part, if a company wants to earn $60,000 in revenue, how many premium movies must be rented if the number of old movies rented is 6,000? So we have to think about where we're plugging this information in. If 60,000 in revenue is listed first, that's our R value. We're trying to find premium movies, that would be the variable X, which means we have to know the variable Y. So in this case, Y equals 6,000. All right, plug in what you know and see if you can solve for X. And then again, press play to see how you did. Let's see how you did. By plugging in 6,000 for X, I ended up getting 18,000 equals 15 times X, and when I divided out that 15, I got 1,200. What this means for our problem is that we'd have to sell 1,200 premium rentals to earn the revenue of $60,000. Now that you've completed the notes for 1.4, please show the notes to the sub so that your name can get checked off, and then work on the 1.4 CYU practice problems. It's a worksheet on Schoology, and I'd like you to work on 1 through 25 odds.